The only little girl who walked away from the family Christmas table without a single gift wasn't crying. She simply smiled, hugged the empty space where everyone else had stacked colorful boxes, and whispered that maybe Santa had accidentally forgotten her address. At just 7 years old, she tried to protect every adult in the room from the pain they had chosen to give her. The moment I watched my daughter pretend she wasn't heartbroken, something inside me finally broke after 35 years of pretending my own heart wasn't. If you believe kindness should never have conditions, forgiveness should never erase accountability, hope can heal broken families, and second chances are worth fighting for, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we share reminds our community that compassion still matters. For most of my life, people described me using the same words. Practical. Responsible. Independent. Reliable. My relatives repeated those words so often they stopped sounding like compliments and started feeling like excuses. Whenever birthdays came around, I received practical socks while my younger cousins opened expensive toys. Whenever achievements were celebrated, mine were acknowledged with polite smiles while everyone gathered around someone else's success. Whenever I quietly accepted another disappointment, my parents would smile proudly and tell everyone that I never complained because I was mature. They never realized maturity is often just a child learning that speaking up changes nothing. My name is Meredith, and I was the oldest of 2 daughters. My younger sister, Brielle, had always been the sunshine of our household. She laughed loudly, made friends instantly, and somehow convinced every room that she deserved to be its center. I never hated her. In many ways, I admired how easily people loved her. She wasn't cruel or selfish. She simply grew up believing attention was as natural as breathing because it had always surrounded her. Our parents, Graham and Elaine, never admitted they played favorites. They insisted they loved us equally. They would become offended if anyone suggested otherwise. Yet equality was never measured by what they said. It was measured by what they did. When Brielle wanted ballet lessons, they somehow found the money. When I asked to attend an academic summer program, they reminded me that scholarships built character. When Brielle forgot to finish college because she wanted to travel with friends, my parents called her adventurous. When I graduated with honors after working 2 part-time jobs, they nodded proudly before asking if I could help Brielle organize her apartment because she was feeling overwhelmed. After years of living inside that pattern, I stopped expecting fairness. Expectations only create disappointment. Acceptance seemed easier. Eventually I married a thoughtful architect named Rowan. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He remembered little things. He always noticed when I looked exhausted before I admitted it. He never treated kindness like a performance. Being loved by Rowan felt unfamiliar at first because it required nothing except being myself. 3 years later our daughter, Cora, arrived with bright copper-colored curls and the kind of smile that made strangers smile back before realizing why. She loved drawing birds, collecting smooth stones from parks, and asking impossible questions that somehow made adults think harder than children ever should. The first time my parents held her, I believed everything might finally change. Grandparents often soften with age. Maybe they would love without comparison. Maybe they had learned. For a while, I convinced myself they had. Family gatherings became more frequent once grandchildren arrived. Brielle eventually married a successful financial consultant named Owen. Together they had 3 energetic children, Felix, Marin, and Theo. Every holiday our parents hosted elaborate daytime celebrations in their bright countryside home. The dining table stretched across the sunroom where natural light poured through enormous windows. Elaine decorated every corner with ribbons, flowers, and handcrafted ornaments regardless of the season. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Pictures certainly suggested we were. Those photographs still exist. They never captured what happened just outside the frame. It started subtly. Felix received a personalized bicycle because he loved riding. Cora received coloring pencils. Marin received an expensive dollhouse complete with miniature furniture. Cora received a notebook. Theo received a gaming console. Cora received homemade cookies wrapped in paper. Each gift by itself wasn't the issue. The pattern was. Every explanation sounded reasonable until you placed every holiday side by side. Whenever Rowan quietly mentioned it during the drive home, I defended my parents. Maybe finances were tighter. Maybe they simply didn't know what Cora wanted. Maybe I was imagining things because of my own childhood. Denial is remarkably creative when protecting people we desperately want to believe love us equally. One spring afternoon, when Cora was 5, we attended an Easter picnic at my parents' house. Bright blankets covered the lawn while children searched for hidden eggs beneath flowering trees. Elaine announced that one special golden egg contained a surprise. After 20 minutes, Felix proudly found it behind a garden statue. Inside rested 2 tickets to a famous amusement park. Everyone applauded enthusiastically. An hour later, while helping collect forgotten eggs beneath a wooden bench, Cora discovered another golden egg hidden far away from the game. She ran toward my mother with innocent excitement. Elaine laughed awkwardly before admitting that golden egg wasn't supposed to be there. Inside were chocolate candies that had clearly been placed quickly after the original prize disappeared. I watched my daughter's excitement disappear so quietly that nobody else noticed. Except Rowan. That evening he asked a question I wasn't prepared to answer. How many times does coincidence have to repeat before it becomes a decision? His words stayed with me. Still, I remained silent. Silence had become my survival language long ago. Years passed. Cora never complained. Instead, she admired her cousins. She cheered for them during soccer games. She shared her toys. She congratulated them every birthday. Her heart remained generous despite repeatedly being taught she ranked somewhere below everyone else. Children don't naturally become bitter. Adults teach them how. Thankfully, Rowan and I worked every day to teach the opposite. We built traditions inside our own home. Saturday pancake mornings. Afternoon walks through botanical gardens. Library adventures. Birthday treasure hunts. Volunteer afternoons at animal shelters. I wanted Cora to understand that love was measured in attention, not price tags. For the most part, she believed us. Then came the Christmas gathering that changed everything. Snow covered rooftops outside, but the celebration itself happened during a bright winter afternoon, sunlight reflecting brilliantly across white fields. My parents' home looked magical. Music drifted softly through every room. The dining table overflowed with roasted vegetables, homemade bread, cinnamon desserts, and steaming cider. Guests filled the house with laughter. Children chased each other around decorated trees. Everything appeared perfect. Until gift time arrived. Large wrapped boxes covered one corner of the living room. Each carried beautifully handwritten name tags. Felix. Marin. Theo. My parents smiled proudly as each child unwrapped bicycles, educational tablets, science kits, designer jackets, and personalized keepsakes. Every reaction was photographed. Every smile celebrated. I noticed one name missing. Cora looked too. She didn't interrupt. She waited patiently. Surely another pile would appear. Surely Grandma had simply misplaced hers. Minutes passed. Wrapping paper covered the floor. Everyone admired their presents. No one called Cora's name. She continued sitting quietly beside Rowan, gently folding the ribbon she had picked up from the carpet. Then she looked at me. Not angry. Not jealous. Just confused. My father finally noticed. He cleared his throat before smiling awkwardly. He explained that they hadn't found anything special enough this year and would make it up next time. Next time. Those 2 words echoed louder than every laugh inside that room. Cora stood, walked over to her grandmother, hugged her gently, and said she understood because shopping must have been very busy. Then she whispered the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. Maybe Santa thought I already have enough love at home. No child should have to comfort adults for neglecting them. That was the moment I stopped protecting my parents from the consequences of their choices. I smiled politely. Finished lunch. Helped wash dishes. Thanked everyone for the meal. Rowan watched me carefully because he knew that my silence no longer meant surrender. It meant a decision had finally been made. The next morning, precisely at 8 o'clock, with the winter sun already shining brightly across quiet streets, I stood on my parents' front porch holding only one small cardboard box. Inside wasn't a gift. It contained 35 years of carefully saved birthday cards, faded report cards, childhood photographs, forgotten letters, and every tiny reminder of a daughter who had spent her entire life trying to earn a place in her own family that should never have required earning in the first place. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't there to ask why. I was there to make sure they finally saw what they had refused to see for decades. My mother opened the front door wearing the same comfortable sweater she had worn the previous afternoon. She smiled automatically when she saw me standing on the porch, but her expression changed the moment she noticed the cardboard box in my hands. My father appeared behind her with a coffee mug, surprised to see me so early. They invited me inside as though nothing unusual had happened. The house still smelled like cinnamon and pine from Christmas afternoon. Torn wrapping paper had been cleaned away, the dishes had been washed, and the family photographs from the celebration were already displayed on the mantel. In every picture, smiling faces surrounded piles of colorful presents. Looking at them made my chest ache because the only child missing from every photograph was the one who had quietly slipped into another room after realizing there had never been a gift with her name on it. I sat at the dining table where so many holidays had come and gone. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, making everything appear warm and peaceful. It was strange how beautiful a room could look while holding so many invisible wounds. My parents waited for me to explain why I had arrived unannounced, but I simply placed the box on the table and pushed it toward them. They exchanged puzzled glances before lifting the lid. The first thing my mother pulled out was a second-grade report card. Straight A's. A handwritten note from the teacher praised my kindness, leadership, and determination. Tucked behind it was a faded certificate from a regional science competition I had won at age 12. Next came a photograph of me standing alone in front of my high school after graduation. No parents stood beside me. I remembered that day perfectly. Brielle had forgotten to renew her driver's license and needed someone to take her across town. My parents had missed the ceremony because helping her had seemed more urgent. They promised we would celebrate another day. We never did. My father stared silently at the photograph before setting it aside. My mother reached deeper into the box. There were birthday cards. Every single one had almost identical messages. We're proud of you. You always understand. Thank you for never asking for much. Reading them together revealed something I had never noticed before. None of them mentioned my dreams, my interests, my accomplishments, or who I was becoming. They praised only one quality. That I was easy. Easy children often become invisible adults. Finally, my mother unfolded a small drawing made with crayons. It showed 2 grandparents, 3 smiling children, and one little girl standing several feet away beneath a tiny cloud. Across the top, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Everyone together." On the back, my daughter had written a sentence her teacher had helped her spell. I hope next year Grandma remembers me too. My mother's hands began to shake. She looked up at me with tears already filling her eyes. I had imagined this conversation hundreds of times over the years. In every version, I yelled. I listed every disappointment. I demanded explanations. Instead, my voice remained remarkably calm. I told them that I had spent 35 years convincing myself that unequal treatment didn't matter because I was an adult. Adults survive disappointment. Adults recover. Adults learn to lower expectations. But children don't understand favoritism. Children assume differences mean something is wrong with them. I explained that yesterday my daughter hadn't asked why she didn't receive a gift because she believed she must have done something to deserve being forgotten. That belief terrified me more than anything else. No 7-year-old should carry that burden. My father leaned back in his chair and quietly insisted it had been an oversight. They had simply run out of time. Shopping had become stressful. They meant to order something later. I listened patiently before asking one question. How many oversights make a pattern? Silence settled across the room. I gently reminded them about the Easter egg. The birthdays. The vacations where every cousin returned with matching souvenirs while Cora received a refrigerator magnet. The family photos where someone always forgot to call her over. The soccer games they attended for every other grandchild. The dance recital they promised to attend before canceling at the last minute because Felix had a school presentation on the same afternoon. Every event had sounded reasonable by itself. Together they told a different story. My mother quietly covered her face. My father stared toward the window. Neither interrupted. For the first time in my life, they listened without searching for excuses. After several long moments, my father whispered that he had honestly never realized how often it happened. His words surprised me. Not because I believed them completely. Because I realized he truly hadn't been paying attention. Neglect isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply repeated carelessness that eventually becomes someone's entire childhood. My mother suddenly stood and walked toward a cabinet. She returned carrying several photo albums. Together we began turning pages. Holiday after holiday. Birthday after birthday. Picnic after picnic. There was Brielle with her children. There were the cousins laughing together. There was my father pushing Felix on a swing. There was my mother helping Marin decorate cookies. Page after page. Then gaps. Entire celebrations where Cora barely appeared. Sometimes only the back of her head. Sometimes not at all. My mother's breathing became uneven. She started searching desperately through album after album. Finally she looked at me with complete disbelief. There were almost no photographs of her youngest granddaughter. Not because Cora hadn't attended. Because nobody had thought to call her into the picture. The realization hit harder than any accusation I could have spoken. Around noon the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Brielle stepped inside carrying leftover dessert containers she had forgotten the previous day. She smiled when she saw everyone gathered around old photographs. Within seconds she sensed something was wrong. She asked what had happened. No one answered immediately. Then my father quietly explained everything. To my surprise, Brielle didn't become defensive. She slowly sat beside me and started looking through the albums herself. Her confident expression faded with every page. She whispered something that caught everyone off guard. She admitted she had always assumed my parents bought similar gifts for Cora privately because she rarely paid attention after holidays ended. She confessed that during gatherings she was usually busy managing 3 energetic children. She had never stopped to notice who wasn't receiving attention. Then she remembered something. Several months earlier she had suggested inviting Cora to a special grandmother-granddaughter shopping afternoon. Our mother had replied that Cora probably wasn't interested. No one had even asked Cora. Brielle closed the album and began crying. She apologized to me with a sincerity I had never expected. Not for causing the favoritism. For benefiting from it without noticing. That apology mattered more than she probably realized. Too often, people who receive unfair advantages convince themselves everything is equal because they have never experienced the opposite. Recognition is the first step toward change. We spent hours talking. Really talking. Not defending. Not interrupting. Not pretending. My father admitted something painful. Growing up, his own parents had favored his older brother. He remembered promising himself he would never repeat that mistake. Somewhere along the way, without noticing, history had quietly repeated itself. Not exactly the same. But painfully similar. Patterns survive when they remain unnamed. By early afternoon my mother disappeared upstairs. When she returned, she carried a beautifully wrapped present. She placed it carefully in front of me and said she wanted me to give it to Cora immediately. I looked at the package but didn't touch it. For a moment she looked confused. Then I gently slid it back across the table. I explained that the problem had never been the missing gift. A present could never repair years of feeling invisible. Children remember how people make them feel long after they forget what was inside a box. If they truly wanted another chance, it couldn't begin with wrapping paper. It had to begin with consistency. Attention. Time. Presence. Love that looked the same whether cameras were nearby or not. My mother nodded through tears. She slowly removed the ribbon from the package and set it aside. For the first time in decades, no one tried to solve a deep emotional wound with a purchase. Instead, my parents asked the question I had waited my entire life to hear. What do we need to do to earn our way back into Cora's heart? I looked at both of them for a long moment before answering. The path forward would be far more difficult than buying one forgotten Christmas present. It would require them to become the grandparents they had always believed they already were. I told my parents that if they truly wanted another chance, it could not begin with apologies or expensive presents. It had to begin with showing up. Children don't count love by the price of gifts. They count it by the number of times someone chooses them without being reminded. They remember who comes to their school plays, who asks about their favorite book, who notices when they get a new haircut, who remembers their birthday without checking a calendar, and who makes them feel like they belong before they have to earn it. If Graham and Elaine wanted to become the grandparents they believed they already were, they would have to build that trust one ordinary afternoon at a time. There would be no shortcuts. Neither of them argued. For the first time in decades, my father didn't explain. My mother didn't defend herself. They simply listened. I stood up to leave, carrying the same cardboard box back toward the front door. As I reached the porch, my father quietly called my name. His voice sounded older than I had ever heard it. He admitted something that made every piece of my childhood suddenly fit together. After I was born, he had lost his own father only a few months later. He buried himself in work because grief terrified him. When Brielle came along several years later, life felt lighter again. Without realizing it, he had associated my sister with healing and me with one of the hardest seasons of his life. He insisted he had never loved me less, but he admitted he had probably been emotionally distant because looking at me reminded him of a chapter he had spent decades trying to forget. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't enough to erase the past. But it was the first honest answer I had ever received. My mother then confessed something equally painful. She had always believed I was stronger than everyone else. Whenever two daughters needed her at the same time, she instinctively ran toward the one she believed needed her more. Year after year, that decision became a habit. Eventually she stopped asking whether I needed her because I had become so good at pretending I didn't. She looked at me through tears and admitted that she had confused independence with invincibility. She had spent years praising my strength while quietly depending on it to justify neglect. Those words stayed with me during the drive home. Not because they fixed anything. Because they finally explained everything. When I arrived home, Rowan was helping Cora build a birdhouse in the backyard. Tiny pieces of wood, bright paint, and little paintbrushes covered the picnic table under the warm afternoon sun. Cora looked up with her usual smile and proudly held up the tiny roof she had painted bright blue. Watching her laugh reminded me exactly why I had gone to my parents' house that morning. Not to punish them. Not to embarrass them. To protect this little girl's belief that she mattered. That evening, while the sun was still high, I told Rowan everything that had happened. He wrapped one arm around my shoulders and simply said he was proud that I had spoken with honesty instead of anger. Sometimes the strongest boundaries are drawn with calm voices. The following Saturday afternoon, my parents called. They didn't ask us to come over for lunch. They didn't announce that they had bought a surprise. Instead, they asked if they could meet us at the local botanical garden because Cora had once mentioned loving butterflies. It was such a small request that I almost didn't recognize it as progress. We agreed. The afternoon felt awkward at first. Children don't instantly trust adults who have disappointed them, even when they remain kind. Cora greeted her grandparents politely but stayed close to Rowan and me. My mother didn't pressure her. She simply walked beside her, asking questions about flowers and birds. My father carried a small notebook because he wanted to write down the names of butterflies Cora taught him. Halfway through the visit, he admitted he had never realized there were so many different species. For the first time, they weren't trying to impress her. They were trying to know her. Weeks became months. Something unexpected happened. Consistency replaced grand gestures. My father began attending every one of Cora's weekend soccer matches, even though she usually spent more time chasing butterflies than the ball. He cheered just as loudly when she missed a goal as when she scored one. My mother started a monthly tradition she called Story Saturday. Every first Saturday afternoon of the month, she invited only Cora to bake cookies, paint birdhouses, visit museums, or explore bookstores. She never canceled. Not once. When birthdays arrived, every grandchild received thoughtful gifts chosen with equal care. More importantly, every grandchild received equal attention. Brielle noticed the changes too. One afternoon she surprised me by apologizing again. She admitted she had spent years assuming fairness because life had always been fair to her. She had started paying closer attention, not only within our family but everywhere else. At work, she began noticing quieter co-workers whose ideas were overlooked. At her children's school, she volunteered to make sure every child felt included during classroom celebrations. She told me that recognizing privilege wasn't about feeling guilty. It was about becoming responsible for what you did after noticing it. That conversation healed something between us that I hadn't realized was broken. One warm spring afternoon, nearly a year after that unforgettable Christmas, our entire family gathered for Cora's 8th birthday picnic in the same backyard where so many difficult memories had once been made. This time looked different. Not because of decorations. Because of people. Every child sat together around one long table covered with colorful art supplies instead of expensive toys. My father had built small wooden birdhouses for each grandchild by hand. None of them were perfectly straight. The paint wasn't flawless. The roofs leaned slightly. They were perfect anyway. Each child found their name carefully carved into the front. No one was forgotten. As everyone laughed together beneath the bright afternoon sky, my mother quietly walked over and handed me something folded inside a small envelope. It wasn't money. It wasn't another gift. It was a letter. In careful handwriting, she admitted every mistake she could remember making with me. She didn't excuse a single one. She thanked me for refusing to pass that pain down to my own daughter. At the end of the letter she wrote one sentence that brought tears to my eyes. You taught us that being forgiven is a gift, but becoming worthy of forgiveness is a lifelong choice. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. For the first time in decades, I hugged my parents without carrying the invisible weight of hoping they would finally see me. They already had. Not because I stayed silent. Because I finally spoke. Later that afternoon, I noticed Cora running across the grass with her cousins. She wasn't ahead of them. She wasn't behind them. She was simply one of them. Equal. Included. Loved. That was all I had ever wanted. Before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever found the courage to set a healthy boundary with someone you loved, or has someone given you a second chance that changed your life? Please leave a meaningful comment and share the lesson this story reminded you of. Your words may encourage someone who is quietly carrying the same kind of pain. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As we packed up the picnic that sunny afternoon, I realized the greatest gift my daughter had received wasn't hidden inside a beautifully wrapped box. It was something far more valuable. She had watched an entire family choose humility over pride, accountability over excuses, and love over favoritism. She learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means giving people the opportunity to become better than they once were. Some families break because no one speaks the truth. Others heal because one person finally does. And sometimes, all it takes to change generations is the courage to knock on a familiar door at exactly 8 o'clock on an ordinary morning and refuse to let another child grow up believing they were anything less than enough.